The morning Dex Callahan found the boy. The temperature had dropped to 23 degrees, and the old coal yard on the edge of Millhaven had been locked up for 11 years. Dex wasn't supposed to be there. He was supposed to be 40 minutes north, sitting in a conference room at the Hargrove building, finalizing a waterfront development deal that would have made him the third wealthiest man in the state of Ohio. Instead, he was crouched in the frozen mud behind a chain-link fence, hands zip-tied behind his back, a strip of duct tape across his mouth, stuffed inside the trunk of his own Cadillac Escalade, while two men he'd trusted argued about what to do with him. He'd heard the trunk open. He'd felt the cold air hit him like a wall, and then, instead of a gun or a fist, he'd heard a small voice. Mr. Dex had built his company the way his father had told him never to, by taking risks. Callahan Property Group started in a second-floor office above a dry cleaner in Columbus, Ohio, with 2 employees and a lease Dex had signed with his last $8,000. 22 years later, CPG had developed waterfront properties in 11 states, employed over 400 people, and had Dex's face on the cover of Ohio Business Quarterly 3 times. He had a home in Bexley with a koi pond he never sat beside, and a daughter named Sophie who lived in Portland and called him twice a month out of obligation. What Dex didn't have was people he could trust. He found that out on a Tuesday in January, when his business partner of 14 years, a man named Rourke, had him picked up from his own parking garage, bound, and deposited in the trunk of his own vehicle. Rourke wanted the waterfront contract. Rourke wanted CPG. And Rourke, Dex realized too late, had been planning this for at least 2 years. They drove for over an hour. Dex counted turns, tracked time, tried to slow his breathing the way his cardiologist had shown him for a different kind of emergency. He was 56 years old. He had a replaced hip and a medication he took every morning that was sitting on his kitchen counter in Bexley, 40 miles away. He tried not to think about that. When the car finally stopped, the men got out and walked away without opening the trunk. They were coming back. He was certain they were coming back. He just didn't know when. That was how Dex Callahan spent the next 4 hours, in the dark, in the cold, working the zip ties against a latch he couldn't quite reach, trying to stay warm, trying to stay calm, trying to believe that a man who had survived bankruptcy at 31 and a divorce at 44 and open-heart surgery at 52 could also survive this. He was still trying to believe it when the trunk opened and he saw the sky, gray and low and about to snow, and heard that small voice say, "Mr.?" Benny Okafor was 11 years old, and he had no business being at the Millhaven coal yard on a Wednesday morning in January. He should have been in school. He knew that. But the school bus had broken down at the corner of Route 9 and Carver Street, and Benny had stood there in the cold watching the other kids complain, and then he'd just started walking. Not towards school, just away from the bus stop, through the gap in the fence he'd found last summer, through the old coal yard where he sometimes came to think. Benny did his best thinking at the coal yard. Nobody bothered him there. There was a concrete ledge on the south side where the afternoon sun hit it just right, and he'd sit there with his notebook and write things down. Not a diary, exactly. More like observations. Things he noticed that other people didn't seem to. Like how his grandmother's hands had started shaking last spring. Like how the lights at their apartment flickered on the 3rd floor but not the 2nd. Like how his teacher, Mr. Alves, always paused before calling on Benny, as if deciding each time whether it was worth the trouble. Benny was used to being the kid people paused on. His mother had left when he was 4. His father was a name on a form somewhere. He lived with his grandmother, Auntie Lou, though she wasn't really his aunt. She was his grandmother's oldest friend who'd taken them both in when things got bad 3 years ago. Their apartment was on Carver Street, 2 blocks from the coal yard, in a building that smelled like other people's cooking and had a radiator that clanged all night. He wasn't unhappy, exactly. He just knew, in the way that children who've had to grow up a little too fast always know, that things were fragile. Auntie Lou was 71 and her knees hurt. His grandmother, Nana June, had a cough that had been going on since October. The electric bill was 2 months behind. Benny knew these things the way other kids his age knew sports scores, automatically, without even trying. He was sitting on his concrete ledge, notebook open, when he heard the noise, a dull, rhythmic banging. Coming from the far side of the yard, near the old loading dock where they used to bring in the coal trucks. Benny closed his notebook. He sat still for a moment the way animals do, when they're deciding whether a sound means danger or just weather. Then he got up and walked toward it. The Cadillac was parked half behind a collapsed section of corrugated wall, half in the open. Black, expensive looking, completely wrong for this place. Benny stood 10 feet away and looked at it for a long moment. Then the banging came again, muffled, desperate, from the trunk. He walked to the back of the car. His hand hovered over the latch. "Hello?" he said. His voice came out smaller than he'd intended. The banging stopped. "Is someone in there?" Benny said. A muffled sound. Not words. Something urgent. Benny pulled the trunk release. The man who emerged was large and gray-haired and bleeding from a cut above his eyebrow and had duct tape across his mouth. And the first thing Benny felt was a spike of pure fear so sharp it almost made him run. But the man's eyes, light brown, exhausted, wet at the corners, weren't threatening. They were the eyes of someone who had been very afraid for a very long time, and was only now, this second, beginning to believe they might be okay. Benny pulled the tape. He did it fast, the way his grandmother did with bandages. Quick is kinder, and the man made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob, and then said, in a wrecked voice, thank you, son. Can you? There are ties on my wrists. Do you have anything sharp?" Benny had a pocket knife. It had belonged to his grandfather, who he'd never met, and Nana June had given it to him last Christmas because she said every young man needed one. He'd never used it for anything more than sharpening pencils. He used it now. "What happened to you?" Benny asked, sawing at the plastic. "People I trusted," the man said. "What's your name?" "Benny Dex," the man said. "I need to make a phone call, Benny. Do you have a phone?" Benny had a phone. It was a prepaid from the dollar store, cracked across one corner, with about 40 minutes of talk time left on it. He handed it over without hesitating. Later, he would not be able to explain exactly why he'd done that. He just had. Something in the man's voice told him it was the right thing. The police came first, then an ambulance, then 2 black SUVs with men in suits who spoke to Dex quietly and showed the police something in a wallet. Benny sat on the concrete ledge and watched it all. One of the suit men came over and asked him questions, wrote things down, thanked him. A paramedic wrapped a silver blanket around Dex's shoulders and checked the cut on his head. Before they put Dex in the ambulance, he walked over to where Benny was sitting. He was still wearing the silver blanket. With his gray hair and the cut on his forehead and his expensive ruined suit, he looked like some kind of battered emperor. "You saved my life," Dex said. Benny considered that. "I just opened the trunk," he said. "The temperature last night was 23 degrees, Dex said. "I had been in there since 8:30 yesterday morning." He paused. "You opened the trunk?" Benny looked at him. The man's eyes were doing something complicated, like he was trying to memorize Benny's face. "Are you going to be okay?" Benny asked. Dex looked down at the silver blanket. "I think so." He reached into his jacket, half destroyed, still somehow expensive, and pulled out a card. He held it out to Benny. "That's my assistant's number. She'll know how to reach me after all of this." He gestured vaguely at the coal yard, the police tape going up, the men with suits. "I want to help you, Benny, whatever that looks like. I mean it." Benny took the card. He looked at it. "Callahan Property Group, Dexter R. Callahan, founder and CEO." "Okay," Benny said. "Okay," Dex said. The ambulance took him away. Benny stayed until the police released him, then walked home, the card in his pocket, and told Nana June he'd been at school. 3 weeks passed. Benny didn't call the number. He wanted to, took the card out a dozen times, turned it over in his hands, but something stopped him each time. It wasn't distrust, exactly. It was more like the feeling he got when someone offered to help, and he didn't know yet if it was real. People had offered to help before, caseworkers, teachers, the pastor at the church on Millard Street. Most of them meant it when they said it. It was just that meaning it and doing it were 2 different things, and Benny had learned the hard way which one actually paid the electric bill. Nana June's cough got worse. Benny started making her tea twice a day with honey he bought with his own money from walking Mrs. Patterson's dog on weekends. Auntie Lou's knees were bad enough now that she had trouble on the stairs. Benny carried groceries up. He didn't complain. This was just what was needed, so he did it. At school, he was getting A's in language arts and a C in math, which bothered him more than it probably should have. Mr. Alvarez had written on his last essay, "Exceptional voice, Benny. You see things clearly." Benny had read that 3 times before folding the paper into his notebook. Then one afternoon in February, Nana June had what the doctor called a cardiac episode. Benny was at school. He came home to find the apartment empty and a note from Auntie Lou on the kitchen table. At St. Vincent's, don't worry. Lock the door. He locked the door. He worried. At the hospital, the doctor used words like arrhythmia and monitoring, and we want to keep her a few more days. Nana June looked small in the hospital bed in a way she didn't look anywhere else. Her hands on the blanket were the hands Benny had held his whole life. Broad-palmed, warm, rough from work, and he held them now and didn't say anything, because there wasn't anything useful to say. On the walk home in the dark, with the temperature dropping and the Carver Street lights doing their usual flicker, Benny took out his wallet and found the card. He called the number. The woman who answered was named Pamela, and she had a voice like someone who handled difficult situations before breakfast. She listened to Benny explain who he was. "I'm the boy from the coal yard. In January, I'm the one who..." and then said, "Benny, yes, Mr. Callahan has been hoping you'd call. Are you all right?" Which was not the response Benny had expected. "My grandmother is in the hospital," he said. I'm not sure why I called. Where are you right now?" "Walking home." "What's the address?" he told her. 20 minutes later, a car arrived. Not a flashy car, just a clean black sedan. And Pamela herself was in it, with a thermos of hot chocolate and a paper bag from the diner on 5th that turned out to contain a grilled cheese and a bowl of tomato soup. She handed them through the window without making it a big deal, and Benny ate in the back seat and didn't say anything for a while, and found to his embarrassment that his eyes had gone wet. "Mr. Callahan would like to meet with you," Pamela said. "And whoever takes care of you, when your grandmother is better. No pressure, no strings. He just wants to say thank you properly." Benny looked out the window at the Carver Street building, lit up in the cold. "He already said thank you," he said. "He wants to do more than say it." Nana June came home on a Thursday. She was tired and quieter than usual, and had new medications that Benny organized into a pillbox by day and time while she watched him from the couch with an expression he couldn't quite read. Pride, maybe. Something else underneath it. "You're too young to be doing this," she said. "Someone has to," Benny said. "Benny, Nana, I'm fine." He snapped the last compartment shut. "Saturday or Friday?" For Thursday pill he means fry. He stopped, recounted. "Saturday. The small blue one is Saturday." Nana June watched him. "Pamela called me," she said. Benny went still. She explained who she was, who Mr. Callahan is. Nana June's voice was careful. She was respectful. She didn't. Nana June paused, searching for the word. "She didn't make me feel like charity." Benny looked at the pillbox. "I want to meet him," Nana June said. "I want to look at this man face to face before anything else happens." "Nothing has to happen," Benny said. "Benny." Her voice was the one she used when she needed him to hear her. "You saved a man's life. Let him be grateful." They met at a diner. Dex's choice, Pamela had explained, because he didn't want to make them come to an office. The diner was called Harlow's, and it was clean and warm and had booths with red vinyl seats. Dex was already there when they arrived, and he stood up when they walked in. And the first thing Benny noticed was that he was in a regular coat, not the expensive destroyed suit, and he looked like someone who had thought carefully about what to wear, so as not to make them feel out of place. The second thing Benny noticed was that Dex Callahan looked different than he had in the coal yard, less like a battered emperor, more like a regular man, middle-aged and tired around the eyes, who was trying very hard to hold something together. "Mrs. Okafor," Dex said, extending his hand to Nana June. "Thank you for coming. I'm Dex." Nana June looked at his hand, then she looked at his face. She had a way of assessing people. Benny had grown up watching her do it. That was not unkind, but was absolutely without pretense. She took his hand. "You look better than I expected," she said. Dex blinked. Then he laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of him, and Benny felt something in the room settle. "I feel better than I expected," he said. They sat down. They ordered coffee and pie. Dex talked to Nana June the way Benny had hoped he would, looking at her, listening when she spoke, not condescending, not performing. He asked about her health and didn't look away when she told him, honestly, that it had been a hard winter. He asked about Benny's school and listened to the actual answer. He did not once take out his phone. At some point during the second cup of coffee, he said, "I want to be honest with you about what I'm offering and why." Nana June set down her cup. "Go ahead. I have more money than I need. That's just a fact. I made it and I don't know always what to do with it." He looked at Benny. What your grandson did, what he chose to do at 11 years old alone in a coal yard, that's not a small thing. Most adults would have walked away. Most people, period. He paused. I'm not in the business of charity. I'm in the business of recognizing something real when I see it. What are you proposing? Nana June said. He proposed that Benny's school tuition through high school be taken care of. A private school on the north side, Grant Academy, where Dex had quietly contacted the admissions director and where there was already a spot. That Nana June's medical bills, current and going forward, be handled through a trust Pamela had already set up quietly that required nothing from them except acceptance. That Auntie Lou, he'd found out about her, asked about her, made a note, be included. Not as an afterthought, as a given. And in return, Nana June said. Dex looked at her steadily. Nothing. I just want the kid to have a fair shot. The diner hummed around them. Someone at the counter laughed at something on their phone. Outside, a February wind pushed trash across the sidewalk. I'm not easy to fool, Nana June said. I've been doing this a long time. I know, Dex said. I'm not trying to fool you. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Benny. Benny, who had been watching everything and saying almost nothing, the way he always did when something mattered. What do you think? She asked him. Benny thought about the card in his pocket in the cold outside St. Vincent's. He thought about Pamela showing up with hot chocolate. He thought about the way Dex had listed Auntie Lou without being asked. I think he means it, Benny said. Grant Academy was 40 minutes away by bus, which Benny took alone every morning at 6:53, notebook in his backpack, sometimes the only kid on that bus wearing a uniform that didn't quite fit yet. He didn't mind. He was used to being the only. The school itself was harder than what he'd come from, and that was the point. In his first week, a boy named Crawford made a comment about the bus. Benny looked at him with the same assessing look he'd inherited from Nana June and said, very quietly, "That's all you've got." Crawford didn't bother him again. By March, he had made one real friend, a girl named Adaisy, whose parents were Nigerian-American and who was, like Benny, perpetually observing. They compared notebooks one afternoon at lunch and discovered they'd been independently cataloging the same things. The way teachers' voices changed when they called on certain students, the different ways the kitchen staff were treated by faculty versus students, the way the old money kids carried themselves versus the scholarship kids. They sat in the cafeteria and felt, for the first time in their respective Grant Academy experiences, like they were in the right place. Dex called once a month, not to check up, or not only to check up, but to talk. He asked what Benny was reading. He told Benny about a property deal in Cincinnati that had gone sideways, explained why in terms Benny mostly understood, asked what Benny thought he'd done wrong. Benny thought about it carefully and said, "You trusted the relationship more than the paperwork." Dex went quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That's exactly right." He did not say it the way adults said things to children to make them feel good. He said it the way someone says something when they mean it. What Benny didn't know, what Nana June would tell him much later, was that in those early months, Dex was going through something. The legal case against Rourke was complicated and public and ugly. CPG had been in the news. Some of Dex's longtime investors had pulled back, watching to see which way things fell. His daughter Sophie had called twice and then gone quiet in the way she sometimes did, and Dex had told Nana June, on one of the evenings she'd invited him for dinner on Carver Street, that he didn't know how to reach her anymore and that it was his fault. Probably, because work had always come first. Always, Nana June had said. Most of the time, Dex had said, which might as well be always. Nana June had given him more sweet potato pie and said, "Then that's where you start." It was an April afternoon, almost 3 months after the coal yard, that it happened. Benny was at the kitchen table doing algebra, still the C subject, still stubborn when his phone rang. It was Dex's cell, not Pamela's line, which was unusual. "Hey," Dex said. His voice was different, stripped down. "Are you home?" "Yeah," Benny said. "What's wrong?" A pause. "Nothing's wrong. I got some news today." Another pause, longer. "About my daughter." Sophie had been 5 years old when Dex's marriage ended. The divorce had been civil in the way divorces are when both people are too exhausted to fight, politely, carefully, with lawyers present. Sophie had lived with her mother, Rebecca, in Portland. Dex had visited 4 times a year for the first decade, then 3, then less. He and Sophie had grown into the kind of distance that's worse than estrangement, because it masquerades as okay. Regular calls on birthdays, careful conversations, a relationship that functioned but didn't breathe. What Rebecca had told Sophie last year, and what Sophie had only just told Dex today, was that the accident when Sophie was 2, the one in the car, on the highway in winter, the one Dex still saw sometimes when he closed his eyes, had been worse than anyone had told him at the time. Sophie had a traumatic brain injury. Small, they'd said then, manageable, but it had shaped things in ways nobody had tracked because nobody had been looking for them. The attention problems, the processing delays, the way Sophie had always seemed to be working twice as hard as everyone else and getting half the credit. She didn't tell me, Dex said over the phone. Rebecca didn't tell me. I don't know if she didn't think it mattered or if she was protecting Sophie or what she was. He stopped. Sophie is 31 years old and she has been managing a brain injury alone for 30 years and I didn't know. Benny sat with that. Outside, a car went by on Carver Street. Are you calling her? He asked. I'm about to, Dex said. I needed to tell someone first. I'm not sure why you. He paused. Maybe because you're the one who opened the trunk. Benny thought about that. You should call her, Benny said. You know what to say. I don't, Dex said. I really don't. You say you didn't know and you're sorry and you want to start from where you are now. That's all. Benny looked at the algebra worksheet in front of him. You can't fix what was. You can only... He paused. You can only be there now. A long silence. When did you get so wise? Dex said, and Benny could hear, underneath the words, that his eyes were doing that complicated thing again. Nana June, Benny said. It's all from Nana June. Dex called Sophie that evening. They talked for 2 hours. Nana June didn't know this, and Benny would only find out later, but during that call Dex said things he had been holding for years, not explained away, not justified, just named. I chose work when I should have chosen you. I didn't know how to show up, and I convinced myself that providing was the same as presence. I was wrong, and Sophie, who had her mother's practicality and her father's stubbornness and a whole private interior life that neither of them had fully seen, said, I know, Dad, I know. Not forgiving him on the spot, that wasn't Sophie, and Dex wouldn't have wanted her to, but acknowledging the conversation as real. As a beginning, Sophie came to Columbus in June. Benny met her at the dinner Dex hosted at Harlow's Diner, which had by now become something like their place. Sophie was tall like her father, and guarded like someone who'd learned to be, but she had a curiosity that showed itself in the questions she asked. Not surface questions, but the real ones. She asked Benny about school. She asked Nana June about the neighborhood. She asked Auntie Lou, who had come and was sitting with her bad knees in a good chair. Dex had quietly arranged to have at their regular table what she was reading. Auntie Lou was reading 3 things at once, as always, and proceeded to describe all 3. Sophie pulled out her phone and took notes. After dinner, while Nana June and Auntie Lou and Dex talked at the table, Benny and Sophie stood outside on the sidewalk. It was warm now, June warm, and the city smelled like rain that had already passed. He talks about you a lot, Sophie said. He talks about you a lot too, Benny said. Sophie looked at the street. I was angry at him for a long time, she said. I probably still am, parts of me. She said it plainly, the way someone says something they've already processed enough to speak out loud. But he's trying, I can see that. He is, Benny said. You're good for him, Sophie said. I don't know if he's told you that. Benny considered the question. He's good for me too, he said. It kind of goes both ways. Sophie looked at him. She smiled. A real one. The kind that took over the whole face without permission, and it was so much like her father's surprised laugh in Harlow's that Benny felt something click into place, like a latch releasing. The legal case against Rourke concluded in August. He was convicted on charges of kidnapping, criminal conspiracy, and fraud, and would spend the next several years in a federal correctional facility in Michigan. Dex sat in the courtroom for the verdict, alone, and when it was read, he didn't feel the satisfaction he'd expected. He felt tired, mostly, and then underneath the tired, something that took him a while to name. Relief that it was over, and stranger than that, gratitude that it had happened, which seemed like an insane thing to feel. But without Rourke, without the coal yard, without that particular January morning, Dex would still be the man he'd been, the one who knew everything about property development and almost nothing about what actually mattered. He wouldn't have called Benny. He wouldn't have sat in Harlow's Diner and talked to Nana June. He wouldn't have called Sophie. He sat with that in the courthouse parking lot for a while, the August heat coming off the asphalt, and then he drove to Carver Street. Benny was on the front steps. He had his notebook open and was writing something, and he looked up when Dex's car pulled in. "Verdict," he said. "Guilty," Dex said. He sat down on the step beside Benny. "How was school today?" "Good," Benny said. Crawford stopped being an idiot. "Finally, that's progress." "Adaze thinks it's because she told him some things," Benny said. "I believe her." They sat there for a while in the August heat. Down the block, a kid was riding a bicycle in slow circles. The Carver Street lights were all working today, which didn't always happen. "Can I ask you something?" Benny said. "Yeah. Do you think things happen for a reason?" He said it the way he said things when he'd been sitting with the question for a while. Like, not in a religious way necessarily, just, in general. Dex thought about it. For real, not a quick answer. "I think," he said slowly, "that most things just happen, and then afterward we decide what they mean." He looked at the kid on the bicycle. "I think the meaning is real, even if the reason wasn't planned." Benny wrote something in his notebook. "That," Benny said. Dex asked. "That's going in." Dex smiled. "Going where?" Benny closed the notebook and tapped the cover. "I'm writing something," he said. "I've been writing it since January." "About what?" Benny was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "About a morning in a coal yard. About what happens after." He paused. "About how sometimes the smallest thing, just stopping, just looking, changes everything." The bicycle kid made another slow circle. Somewhere up on the second floor, Nana June's radio played something low and gospel-edged. Auntie Lou's light was on in the third-floor window. Dex looked at the notebook. He thought about a trunk opening and cold air and light brown eyes that weren't threatening. He thought about a voice, smaller than it wanted to be, but steady. "Is someone in there?" "Benny," he said. "Yeah, thank you." Sheffed it the same way he'd said it in the coal yard, all those months ago, like it was the truest sentence he knew. Benny looked at him sideways. "You already said that." "I know," Dex said. "Some things are worth saying more than once." The evening settled around them, warm and ordinary, and full of everything that had quietly, without anyone planning it, become home.